Hi everyone, and welcome to the MBA 627 Advanced Business Research Lecture Series. My name is Dr. Derajat Tasamma. In this lecture, we will go in detail and discuss the importance of theory and theoretical framework for completing a successful research. If you recall from the previous lecture, in chapter 1, there are a minimum of 7 components that we have to put together and use it as a GPS for the rest of our chapters. And out of those 7 components, theoretical framework is one of them. I can probably go back and say a few words about those components. The first one is we have to write a few paragraphs about a general statement on what we wanted to accomplish in our research. That is included in the introduction and background section. And the second part is we need to define our research problem, because every research, whether it's a social science or a natural science, starts with a problem. If we don't narrow down the problem, what we want to accomplish or address or resolve or probably brings to the public attention, then the rest of the project is not going to be clear. So problem statement is really a good part. And then the other one is the objective of the study. Okay, what do we want to accomplish from this research? Of course, we need to also define a few high-level research questions that will help us to to go in detail in the research world, and those high-level research questions guide us to do our research. And the other component is defining your hypothesis. It's a statement defining what you want to test when you go to chapter 3 and then chapter 4. And the fifth component, which we're going to discuss in detail today, is we have to find and put together a few theories or theoretical framework or models that will give a ground or a foundation for our research. If you also recall from the previous lecture, what I said was that the difference between a term paper and a research paper is that it's like equivalent of building your house on sand or on solid rock. When hurricane or when a high speed wind come to that place, probably the one that's built on sand will be wiped out quickly than the one that's built on the bedrock. So theory gives your research as a foundation for giving or probably gives a flavor, or it gives a very strong argument about what you are doing. So if you are a peer review journal reviewer, or if you are working in a conference reviewing process, the first criteria we look as a reviewer is what is the theoretical framework for this research? How is this research being formulated? What are the high-level questions associated with this research, and how is the hypothesis is defined? So for the most part, we look for a theory. We look whether that research paper has supported by theory. So theories are really important, but I see many students get confused between theory and then other component of the research. So that's the reason why we are here today. All right. Before we discuss the type of theories available in social studies, let me just go back and say a few words about actually what is the theory. Um, you know, we can. It's useful to go back to etymology of the word, or used by the philosophers in history, especially the Greek and the Ottomans, that the word theory was originated from theorin, which is a Greek word which means that to look upon, to observe, to consider, to contemplate, or looking at or looking more closely, observation, consideration, insight, and scientific contemplations. So when you ask that, why are all these definitions apply to one theory, is that because the goal of all of these activities was defined to a certain truth. Means that to link the very basic essence of that problem. So in the present day theory, we can see that their general goal is to accomplish an understanding of the reality. If I say the theory of organizational learning, developed by Peter Senge, who is still teach at MIS Salon as a very accomplished professor, and then he has actually published many books, and among them one of them is called The Fifth Discipline, and he developed his theory to actually understand the reality. So the reality means that his theory, the theory of organizational learning, says that organizations are like human beings. They were, once upon a time they used to be a child, and they start a very small company, and they grow, they get old, and then they die. So if we treat organizations as a human being to extend their lifespan, then organizations constantly need to change or adapt to the globalization, to the change in the world situation, and the geopolitical environment, in the economic imbalance, and then after all in their customer demands. So when Peter wrote the theory of organizational learning, he first identified that many organizations fail because of lack of flexibility, or because of lack of vision in their part. So when you see that all the theories are there to understand reality, okay, and in your research you're supposed to develop, or you're supposed to put together between 3 to 5 theories that are related to your your research, okay, and I can give you a few more theories that we that have been working with my student in the past, and you can actually go back and Google what they mean, and then I'll also probably give you a high level summary of what the theories is. For example, the theory of moral ethics, the theory of human behavior, the theory of competitiveness, theory of social responsibilities, Maslow's theory of needs, market theory of wage determination, game theory, the social learning theory, the theory of rotten apples, and many theories. So if I give you one topic, um, for example, one of the research topic, uh, published by one of my students last fall was to identify the impact of corruption on economic growth and development in the former Soviet Union country. I don't want to name the country. So in her research, she defined her research problem, she defined her hypothesis, she defined some of the high level research questions, and of course she also defined her theories. And in her theory, she she used the theory of game, the theory of rotten apple, and then the theory of social learning, which are directly and indirectly associated with corruption. So when I say pick your theory, it doesn't mean that you pick a theory that has a one-to-one relationship with what you are doing. That's not the case. um, the the major reason, or the main reason for picking your theory, is to support your argument and to link your argument with a quote-unquote universal truth, or universally accepted by your domain, so that you can actually link to that. Means that you use proper foundation. So you can also use one theory for many students can use one theory for different research, because theories often have a very broad scope and understanding. For example, this student who wanted to study the economic impact of corruption in the former Soviet Union, she used a game theory. Means that she tried to link how power struggle in that country is linked with with a game. Means that it's kind of a game with 2, 3, 4 different parties and different factions playing the game, and she tried to look and then link those theories and then the game theory to her research. So what in her view is game theory is a study of strategic decision making. So imagine if you are studying a political struggle or a corruption or some of the issues in governing, then game theory is a foundation. Whether those people knowingly unknowingly played that game, or whether those people may have prior knowledge of what a game theory is, but as a researcher you have to link that to your research. So this game theory, specifically the study of mathematical model of conflict and cooperation between intelligent rational decision makers. So who are the decision makers? The people in power. How they are doing? They're trying to use a different game model so that they can survive, and then they can actually attack their opponents. An alternative term suggested as it's a more descriptive name of the discipline is interactive decision theory. Okay, so this game theory is mainly used in economic and political science, but she tried to relate to corruption. Okay, one of the pioneer of those theories, John Cassidy, explains the financial crisis with game theory, which can very well be applied to corruption. So he argues that the cause of the crisis was not the Wall Street CEOs acted with greed, overconfidence, and downright stupidity, as the word of the street would have you believe, but that they acted rationally given the circumstances, he continued. So the root problem is that what might be termed rational irrationality, that the behavior that on the individual level is perfectly reasonable, but that when aggregated in the market product, it is kind of a disaster. So you may need to read twice, 3, 4 times to understand what it means, because why is the 2008 financial crisis was analyzed using game theories, because so a few people in Wall Street actually design those different products, and then they actually brought the market down because that was something which they want to do. Okay. The other theory she used for her research is social learning theory. Okay, so you might want to pay attention what the definition of social learning theory and how she applied that theory into studying corruption in her country. Okay, so the social learning theory proposed by Albert Bandura has become perhaps the most influential theory of learning and development. There are 3 core concepts at the heart of social learning theory. The first one is that idea that people can learn through observation. Next is the notation that internal mental states are an essential part of the process. And then the third is that this theory recognizes that just because something has been learned, it doesn't mean that it will result in a change in behavior. Okay, so her argument is that I applied this theory, okay, or quote unquote, I applied this theory to corruption because if the government system is already corrupted, the new generation of employees who just started their career in government by observing their superior will learn a lot from them, especially how to bribe and then how to take bribe. So this exact theory, why corruption exists and is so hard to cure, and is directly related to the first basic model of observational learning that the author identified. Okay, so when you see that she used the social behavior theory to connect her research of corruption, so one might ask that what has to do this social behavior theory with corruption, or what game theory has to do with corruption? Because usually, when we hear game theory, what comes first to mind is that, okay, this is a mathematical formula and it has nothing to do. And I also want you to notice that close 60 to 70% of social science theories originated from the natural science. Means that those theories were first developed by a natural science or a scientist in the science field, and is applied to social studies. The theory of organizational learning, or the theory of the general systems theory, for example, developed by Berlantafi in the 1920s or 30s, was developed to study the organization of a cell or a human being, where one cell belongs to the entire system, and if you take the cell out of the system, then that cell will die instantly. So even if you see that one component of cell is functioning, but if that component, if you take it out of the general system, then the existence of that special small component is pretty much imminent. So when you think about that, people may ask that why is general systems theory applied to many of the organizational issues we see here in the 21st century? think about another theory. It's called the theory of chaos and complexity. That theory was developed by one of the meteorologists um, who um, who was working on his modeling, and accidentally he typed one number and then he saw a totally different result, and he came up and then he said that with chaos and complexity means that if we change one small thing in one side, then we will have an exponential change on the other side. So you'll be surprised to learn the theories that you never imagined would be used in social studies, because they were primarily developed um, at the natural science. But coming back to this particular example, research study where the student studied the relationship between corruption in her countries, and she used another theory which is called the theory of rotten apple. So let's hear what that theory exactly tells us and how she applied those theories to her research. The theory of rotten apple is a sub-theory of a game theory, and it proves that if you put in one basket good apples and one rotten, so by the time all of good apples will turn to rotten. Very interesting. So there is no any other way, either separate them in early stage or from being spoiled, or it will be too late to change and to do something about it. So the theory of rotten apple is that one rotten apple can spoil the entire basket of clean apples. So if you really wanted to stay those clean apple clean, then you have to take that rotten apple early before it gets contaminated. So that is what she she used that. The same thing happened to the system of corruption in her country. So when you see this example, she used those three theories to study how corruption is affecting her in her country, and she tried to substantiate that with theoretical framework. Another example I can give to you is that another student who did her research on to analyze factors affecting income inequality, that's the case study in the United States. Okay, what are the factors that affect income inequality? So she defined her problem statement, hypothesis, research framework, hypothesis, theoretical framework, and expected outcome. But she used two interesting theories for to support her argument. And the first one is called the Maslow theory of need, which is the Abraham Maslow, the theory of need. And the second one is the market theory of wage determination. So let's see how she linked these two theories with her problem statement and with her research. Because as I said earlier, you have to find one way, your own way. By the way, no one's going to say that this theory is not going to apply to your research, because as long as you find a link to do that, I think it's the burden is on your side. So she used the Maslow theory, which is Abraham Maslow, who was one of the country's most influential psychologists, and who worked in industry as well as in academia, and he developed the hierarchy of need theory. Okay, he presented in 1943 in the U.S. Psychological Review, and later made a famous of in his book Motivation and Personality, which was published in 1954. And in this book, the hierarchy of needs model suggests that people will not have much interest in higher level activities such as pursuing meanings and purpose if they are poorly fed, poorly housed, and basically poor. He continued that people must feel secure, safe, and able to manage the basis of their life before they can get very excited about transforming and moving up to the pyramid. So the further pursuit of a fulfilling lifestyle must wait until the basics are determined. Okay, now she gave us like a high level summary of what the Maslow theory of need is, and she's trying to link with that with the following statement. And what she said was that income inequality between average employee salaries and those of top corporate executives drive people to stagnate at the lower level of the hierarchy of needs. So that was her question, her starting question on identifying the relationship between income inequalities, or finding out those key factors responsible for these income inequalities. Okay, because income inequality, especially in the last few years, has becoming more dramatic than ever. And one might ask if this kind of difference does not worsen the flight of those at the bottom level of the Maslow hierarchy. Of course, because could many of the social problems that confront us today, crime, drug abuse, poor health habits, high school dropout rates, child abuse, and so on, be lessened to some degree if the pay gap was closed. So that was her argument. And her argument in chapter 1, she's trying to link, even before she started her her research, actually, 2, 3, and 4. And then the other theory she used for defining or linking the income inequality in the United States is the market theory of wage determination. Okay, so in this theory, this theory describes as wage the price of labor, and it is determined in the free market just like every other price by the intersection of supply and demand. Okay, that means that when workers sell their labor, the price they can charge is influenced by the number of workers available and the number of workers needed, which is available means the supply, and needed is the demand. So the intersection between all these factors will eventually cause wage to settle. In other words, means that the number of workers, the number of jobs, the skills involved, and the location of job will eventually lead workers and employers to reach a series of wage agreements. If employers, the demand, cannot find enough workers to work for them, then they will raise the price for wage up until they can attract more workers. If workers, on the other side, in the abundance or supply, then the price of wage will fall until the surplus labor decided to go elsewhere in order to find a job. So in a very peculiar way, she tried to connect the market theory of wage determination with her problem statement. So when you see these 2, 3, or 4 research paper, and what they tell us is that they actually use different theories to come up with to connect their research with the research problem and the research theory. Okay, and there is another one which I can actually add to you, is that one of my other student who did a research paper on the economic and social impact of unacceptable working condition, which is we call it sweatshop, and she used a case study of China and Mexico. So she wanted to investigate what is the impact of, especially what's the economic impact of unacceptable working conditions. And she used three theories, and the theory of morality ethics, the theory of human behavior, the theory of competitiveness, and the theory of social responsibilities. So in general, when you do your chapter 1, when you actually start thinking of what you want to do, the first things comes to mind is what type of theory you're going to use. And unfortunately, we don't have a theory bank in the internet that you really need to read more to find out the type of theories that may fit to your research, because I don't think that one theory fits to all problems and issues we have here. But the more you read, the more peer-reviewed journal articles you read, then the higher chance that you have finding a good theory. So to conclude this lecture, I would reiterate the importance of theory, because you have to justify your theory. You have to write your justification on what type of theory you're going to use, how you're going to link those theories with your research. One thing which I wanted to probably leave you as a caveat is that if you wanted to do your research, you don't necessarily have to have a theory. You can have also a theoretical framework, a model, and some of the blueprints. If you wanted to know what happened to the nation's building after the Second World War, then you may pick the martial law. It's technically kind of a theory that guided the Western European countries to build their country, especially the German government, to build their the war-torn economy. So theories are broad, and you can still use theoretical framework, but remember, you need to get at least one or two theories in your area. All right, I think we pretty much covered what is why we do dwell on theory, and the link between your theory and then your research questions, the link between your theories and then how you justify your argument to the world. So in next lecture, we're going to discuss the next component of your chapter 1. Until then, thank you for listening. If you have any question, concern, you let me know, and enjoy your day.